What's going on, everybody? Anon here, and it's time for another quick update for Pokemon and Magic: The Gathering distribution. So we're gonna start with Magic. So Aether Drift is still available in small quantities for the collector booster boxes. I believe PhD still has some. I believe Magazine Exchange still has some. There may be some stragglers in some of the other distributors. I mean, quite honestly, you only have GTS, Alliance, and Southern. So there's only five distributors that carry it. So there's a little bit out there. Innistrad Remastered is completely gone on collectors. I do want to note that even though the price is continuing to be soft with Innistrad Remastered collector boxes, the supply is starting to dry up. Last I checked, there was 252, I think, for sale on TCG Player, and they're selling 20 or 30 a week. There was actually a pretty big spike on Friday. I think there was 15 boxes that sold. So, they're starting to dry up, and I think they're going to start to get interesting here. Aether Drift, who knows? It may take a little bit more time. So moving to Tarkir, this weekend was pre-release weekend. The collector booster boxes blew out everywhere. We had a little bit over a master case for the store. We sold out of everything but I think two boxes, and that's just because we set them aside for other people. And we do sell relatively below market for locals, but we're not selling them for 180 bucks or 190 bucks. I mean, they're priced in the high 200s. So they're going like crazy. One distributor has a few, but they're limited to three per account. I would imagine they're all going to be gone this week, because at that price, you're probably up $100+ day one. So everybody's going to take them. The Commander deck displays, they continue to sell like wildfire. I mean, right now there's like 40 available on TCG Player. There are a handful of distribution, but I do want to mention with the Commander decks, generally we see two waves come out. So we see a large first wave and then a second wave that comes a couple weeks after. We saw the second wave get delivered to distribution basically with the first wave. And I've had multiple distributors confirm, because we had our allocation increased, that this is exactly what happened. And I think the reason that it happened this way was because they wanted the product to go to distribution prior to the end of the quarter. So we've seen all these games by Hasbro between the Amazon dumps, between kind of forcing the second wave to distribution where, hey, we've delivered the product, we can now book the revenue by the end of Q3, to know that their Q1 is going to be a problem. And this is a common theme that we'll see as we talk through Final Fantasy and Spider-Man, where now that they're opening things to print to order, they've ratcheted back print runs. They've driven value through the products for probably 2 years now. It's about time that they lose control. They print things to death on Spider-Man to hit their bonuses for the quarter. And then they give themselves they stub their toe again at the end of the year. But I'm going to do a separate video on that, because, we can kind of see that coming from a mile away. But this is about distribution. So Commander decks, there's one distributor that still has some available. I believe everybody else is sold out. There's about 46 of these, I believe, as I mentioned, on TCG Player. There are a decent number. Last time I checked, a little bit ago, P Football Pete had 67 displays at $249 on eBay. But once those are gone, we're going to be pushing 280. I don't think there's going to be another print run of these coming before September at the very earliest. I know some people said May, but that was based on the understanding that there was a second print run coming. So between the second wave already hitting and Hasbro dumping everything into Amazon, and if you guys look, I mean, there's more than 5,000 of each individual deck and more than 5,000 of the displays sold in Amazon over the last 5 weeks of the quarter. My personal belief is all of that backstock is gone, and there's nowhere to go but up with these products. Moving to Final Fantasy, got an interesting data point this week. Was talking to one of my distributors and just said, hey, look, as we get through Tarkir here, what is the expectation for Final Fantasy? Because we know the prices for the collector boxes and the commander decks and the collector commanders are, super inflated. What is the expectation? And what this person told me was fascinating. He said, we were told that the demand for Final Fantasy is about 4 times what it was for Tarkir. So my response was, yeah, no shit. Of course it is. He said, I was told to expect between 2 to 3 times the amount of product that I got from Tarkir. And that shook me a little bit. So if my allocation at one distributor is 100 collector boxes, just hypothetically, and the way that that distributor works is each rep gets X number of boxes. They allocate them, based on a certain algorithm or metric or, concept, whatever, across their customer base. Now they get 3 times. I'm getting 300 boxes of Final Fantasy when I had only gotten 100 boxes of Tarkir. Now, that may sound like a good thing, but that scares me a little bit. And it scares me a little bit because, yes, there's going to be a lot of demand. And I have no doubt that that extra volume is going to get eaten up relatively quickly. What I don't know is at what point does price sensitivity come into play? And by that, I mean, how many people are pre-ordering Final Fantasy to try to flip it, which is probably not going to happen right away because I am virtually certain that the prices are going to come down as this product comes through distribution. And is there enough demand at a $400 to $450 price point for commander decks, or I'm sorry, for collector boxes versus the $650 or $600, whatever they're selling for now, to eat up, tens to hundreds of thousands of collector boxes. So my personal opinion is yes, there is, but we just don't know. When it comes to the ancillary items, I would imagine that the commander decks and everything else is going to be similar, but I don't know for sure. The discussion was specifically around collector boxes. So if you're a store, chances are, if what I've heard is true, you're probably going to get 2 to 3 times the number of Final Fantasy collector boxes than what you did for Tarkir, which again is great until it's not. And I don't know how close we are to that teeter to swing it the other direction. Now, moving on, Edge of Eternities, I care about it. Purists care about it. Hasbro doesn't give a shit about the set. They've already moved on to Spider-Man. So as you can see, Spider-Man comes out 9/26, which again just happens to be right before the end of their Q3. So they're going to be dumping this product on the open market, probably from the 20th of August straight through to the end of September, to hope to God to make Q3. This has been on open order since effectively the second week of March. So they're going to print and print and print and print until they can't print anymore, because I think stores are going to order 5 times what they want. I think this is a set where they're probably going to get it. Everybody's going to have that oh shit moment, and then it's going to be a mad panic to generate cash. And Hasbro would have already booked their numbers. So if the IP takes a step backwards, they stub their toe, the executives don't care, because in public company world, which is the world that I come from, yeah, if you don't make this quarter, there may not be next quarter. So it doesn't matter. The other thing that's scary here. So collector boosters may contain these cards, traditional foils, blah, 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 headliner mythic in less than 1% of boosters, but I have not seen if they're going to be serialized cards. My fear is there aren't going to be serialized cards because they're going to print so goddamn many of these. They would basically give away what their print run is by the number of serialized cards. So I personally am going to, and I've mentioned this multiple times, I'm only going to order Spider-Man for the store. I have no interest in holding on to it because I personally think it's going to be toxic. Whether you like Spider-Man, don't like Spider-Man, there is going to be a lot of it, and just be careful. So moving on to Pokemon. So a little bit of a quiet week. So here we see the Pokemon Charizard EX Special Collection. Last week it was not updated. It still had the 4/11 release date. It's now pushed back to 6/27, as I mentioned. It is delayed. Now, why is it delayed? So we have 2 potential reasons. So we have, I don't know why they're building battle boxes here. This must be the second wave. So we have the Belly Bolt this week. We have the EV pouch next week that I'm going to be happy to never see again. Then we have some other products here, and then we have the Super Premium Collection. And then we get into Destined Rivals on May 30th. However, I know before I've made the comment that I've talked to everybody at distribution, and everybody has told me they have not heard anything about a restock or a reprint of Prismatic Evolutions, and that was factually correct until late this Saturday or this Friday, where one of my distributors called me and said, "Hey, look, I just noticed there's some movement on a purchase order that was created. It looks like there is something coming in." Um, so he and I had a good conversation. Um, and we really ended up where it's going to be super interesting to see. So, with 151 in most specialty sets, they print a shitload of ETBs up front. They'll ship, and again, I've used this example before. These are just numbers I'm making up. 70% of the product gets shipped out at the release date, and 30% gets held back and sent out in wave two. So, whether it's 4, 5, 6 weeks or months down the line, whenever Pokemon deems that the pricing's starting to get a little bit too high or the availability is starting to get a little bit too tight, they flush it out to market. Now, what's interesting about Prismatic Evolutions is we never got the second drop of Pokemon Center Prismatic Evolutions ETBs on release date. For those of you who don't know anything about Pokemon Center, exclusive ETBs, they're only available on Pokemon Center, and they generally release twice. So you'll have them release when, what is it, Poke Beach does their whole special release set. At some point that they'll drop the release, and then the date that the set releases, they will have a second drop. Now, this didn't happen with Journey Together, because Journey Together actually dropped twice in a couple weeks. Destined Rivals, we haven't gotten enough of time, or haven't gotten close enough to release to tell. But Prismatic Evolution skipped that set, and every set before then, in Scarlet and Violet, has followed that pattern. So one of two things have happened. Either one, it's not a relevant data point. 30% of the first print run sitting there, and what we're going to see is basically the same thing we saw with 151, where there is a restock being pushed out. They're all going to say not for retail sale before January 17th, 2025. Or when they printed the Prismatic Evolutions ETBs, they short printed them, knowing that they were going to have to go back and reprint later. So if we see these ETBs not have the not for retail sale before date, meaning that they're reprinted after release, it's going to set off a couple different thought processes. The first of which is, okay, well, they just printed a bunch of ETBs. So now that they've printed those ETBs, so the challenge with ETBs is twofold. First of which, they have to be hand packed, because there's so many little components in there. You have the insert on the top. The second part is you have to laminate the outer box. So the packaging is the least efficient of anything that Pokemon does. So it's also among the least efficient ways to get packs into the wild, especially for something like Prismatic Evolutions, where the packs are pushing $13, but neither here nor there. They want to print ETBs. It is what it is. The Destined Rival Prismatic Evolutions ETB drop was open for like 3 hours, and they booked what, in my estimation, was somewhere between 1 and 2 million sales of Pokemon Center ETBs. Now, from data scraping, we know that the sales of everything up to that point were somewhere from $165,000 or 165,000 units to 42,500 units, and the 42,500 units is something like Paradox Rift, where they're two different versions. So 4250 per, I think it was like 42,370 or some weird number. So this is a sea change in how many they're printing and what they're doing. So I was kind of waiting for, assuming that they fat fingered something and expected to see a bunch of cancellations, but maybe they really did intend to print that many. And it's because they have multiple lines going to print ETBs right now because of the Prismatic Evolution reprint. What's going to be interesting is, are we going to see all the ETBs being reprinted for all of Scarlet and Violet? Are we going to see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 for Surging all get reprinted here as part of this? What's going to be super interesting is, again, it's great for collectors who don't have these, and it's going to be great to have a much discounted entry point into the market. But again, it's the least efficient way to get packs into the wild. So while it's cool to have new product, the volume of packs isn't the same as just constantly pushing out booster bundles or booster boxes. It's not as concentrated. There's more error. There's more shipping. It just takes infinitely more effort and time to get the same amount of packs into the wild as what it does for booster bundles and booster boxes. So we're going to see what happens here in the next 3 to 4 weeks, and it's going to be fascinating. I personally don't know. I don't have an opinion either way. I kind of hope it's just a restock from the first time and they're not reprinting a bunch of ETBs. But if they are, that's fine as well. I mean, we are in uncharted territory. I know everybody tries to relate where we're at now to COVID. It's apples and oranges, or apples and bananas if you have a kidney like that. So they're completely unrelated. They're completely different catalysts, different times. They are completely unrelated in every way, shape, or form. So we'll see. Other than that, most of the pre-orders for Destined Rivals are due on tomorrow, the 7th. For most of the distribution, we do have some allocations. I have been told from multiple distributors that the booster boxes and ETBs that they have gotten notification that they're getting is on par with what they've gotten from Journey Together. I know some folks have said 10% more. I have heard nobody say less. Now, the folks that said 10% more are different folks than I'm speaking to, just because I haven't gotten to have that conversation with the same distributor to match them up. I kind of tend to aim for different folks that I have access to, just to kind of triangulate across 4 or 5 distributors, as opposed to you talk to the same 1 or 2 and you end up in an echo chamber. But the ancillary products or SKUs, they're going to be tough to get again. The hanger backs aren't going to happen. The bundles, a lot of that stuff's all going to big box stores. ETBs, a lot of them went to big box stores for Journey Together. I think we had distributors where we got multiple hundreds of booster boxes, but we didn't even get 100 ETBs. So, just so you have some magnitude. So anyway, guys, a little bit long-winded tonight. Wanted to talk through a couple things that are going on. Nikki's coming out in 2 weeks. It's going to be interesting. This is like the first, I don't want to say mainstream Weiss release, because it's not really mainstream because it's Weiss. But the first one that's gotten some publicity in a while. So, we've gotten a bunch of cases. We'll see how they sell. Other than that, we have, Magic Pokemon. There's new Godzilla game coming out in July. We'll see what happens there with the tariffs to see if that price changes. And then the same with the Gundam game coming out in July for Bandai. No idea how that's going to be impacted, but hopefully not much, because it looks like it's super interesting. So anyway, guys, like, subscribe, join the Discord, and have a good Sunday night.